investing in sports nutrition, but we're still seeing a population that's increasingly getting heavier and getting sedentary in certain ways. Okay? So that's one side of the puzzle. Right? So we start thinking about social media, we start thinking about sedentary behaviors and not living a healthy, active lifestyle. So that's one piece of the puzzle. But then we go on to the other aspect, the complete opposite spectrum, and we look at eating disorders. Okay? These are also on the rise. Right? This need to be thin, this need to look a certain way. Right? So how do we have a population that is both increasing in eating disorders, is also increasing in obesity? Right? So it's a really interesting dynamic of how do we have both ends of the spectrum increasing at the same time? Right? And how does the role of social media and media in general play into that? So if we look at some social media stats from around the world, and this is something that our global social media team pulled for us, almost half of the world's population is engaged in social networks. Okay, so half of the world's population is looking online to see how should I look? How should the world be? How are other people living? What is going on? How do I now see the world through a different lens than maybe I would have seen it through 5 years ago when I didn't have this glimpse into other people's lives or other people's networks, right? So almost half of the world, 1 million new people are joining every single day, okay? So in some aspects, that's great, right? The world is becoming more connected. That has huge power in so many ways, okay? So when we look at how are people using it, on average, people are on social media over 2 hours a day. Okay. So now let's think about what are the recommendations for physical activity. Recommendations for physical activity, leading a healthy, active lifestyle, being active at least 30 minutes a day. So how does spending 2 hours a day on social media really hinder our ability to be active, right? But can it also help our ability to be active? Right, and we'll talk about some of those accounts in a second. People have on average 8 social media accounts. To be honest, I don't know how people do that. I have one, and it's hard enough to keep up with. But it's crazy, 8. So that's a lot of things to keep track of every single day. It's a lot of people that you're coming in contact with, a lot of people who you're potentially influencing and who are influencing you as well. Okay. Social media is the second most prevalent channel for brands. And that's a really interesting thing, and we'll talk about that in a second, is that how are we being influenced by brands without necessarily knowing it, right? The role of influencers has really started to play a huge role in how people make decisions on a daily basis. Okay, and here in the Philippines, people are spending an average of 10 hours a day on the internet. 10 hours a day. That's almost 50% of your day, right? That is a long time. So if you're spending that much time online, how do you have it have a positive impact rather than a negative impact, right? And what we're seeing is, unfortunately, it's not always a positive impact that social media in particular is having on the world's population, right? So just in general, this is what we're looking at in terms of social media channels. Facebook, still globally the highest number of active users. It really depends on the country. In the United States, Instagram is growing rapidly. But I know here, Facebook is still very, very popular. Right? So these are constantly changing. There's constantly ones that are added every single day. I have 2 younger half-sisters I have to call and be like, what is this new thing people are using? Because every day there's something new. Right? How do you keep up with all these new channels? But the question that we're starting to be faced with is it positive? Right? Is social media having that positive impact that we are hoping for? Right? And there's a difference. Males, females, they're using social media in a different way, and it's having a different impact. Right? So typically, girls use social media more than boys. Okay? Especially if we're looking at the younger population, the millennial population. They're using social media all of the time, right? This is becoming their reality, is social media. How they see their friends, how they see the world, how they see they're supposed to live. They're seeing it through social media, okay? And while there can be a lot of good benefits, and I think that's the challenge for us today, is how do we turn these numbers that we're going to talk about into positive numbers, right? Because right now, look at this. So for people that are using social media, there's significantly increased rates of depression, right? So people that are using social media heavily, 30-40% rates of depression. Okay, so why is that happening, right? And with girls, even more than boys. So girls that are using social media, we're seeing significantly increased rates of depression. For people that are using 5 hours a day or more of social media, we see depression rates of almost 50% in girls, right? 35% in boys. Okay, that's terrible, right? How is something that's supposed to create community and bring our networks and our population closer together, why is this happening, right? And so I was kind of looking at these numbers and thinking, why is this happening? Why is it having this effect? And it kind of took me back to my psychology days, right? What are the human needs? What as a population, what as a person are we striving for every single day? Belonging. We want to feel like we belong to something. We want people to think that we're liked. We want to feel a sense of connection, okay? We want to have health. We want to have prosperity. We want to have safety, right? And now all of these things that you see on here, we're being compared to everybody every single day, right? So, well, this person has this many followers. This person is getting this many likes. This person has this. This person has this. You know, and so now instead of being content with our own life, we're constantly in the state of being compared to other people, right? And it's not necessarily something that happens on purpose. It just kind of happens by the fact that this is what we're inundated with, right? You know, we're all guilty of it. I follow a couple of different, female fashion bloggers, and I find myself watching these channels, and I'm like, oh, I want that. I want that. And they're just showing me their day, right? And their day, I don't know this person, right? But they've got this purse, or they have these clothes, or they have this stuff, and now all of a sudden you're starting to think, well, I don't have those things. A year ago you were perfectly content with your life. You had what you needed, right? But now this lifestyle that's being curated online, we start thinking, I don't have these things. I want these things. I need more. I need to look like this person, right? So how do we fight that, right? Same thing when we look at fitness. Well, I want to look like that person. The problem is, you don't really know what that person actually looks like, right? I went to a Pilates class, and my Pilates teacher was like, hey, do you mind if someone else joins us today? Yeah, sure, no problem. She's like, oh, she's some Instagram blogger or whatnot, right? So I looked her up before class. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna be super out of shape. This is gonna be terrible. I'm gonna be embarrassed in this class. And then this person shows up, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's you, and that's you. You don't look anything like what you look like online. I was looking at pictures. Afterwards, I went back and I looked at pictures. I was like, huh, interesting, right? Interesting what filters can do and what angles can do and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, Photoshop, exactly. We just don't know, right? And we're basing our happiness off of watching these accounts and seeing these people and saying, I have to look like this, right? And I don't look like this. Well, you know what? They also might not look like that, right? And so it's a really interesting reality of how do we then take what we see online and actually make something positive out of it, right? Because we do have the opportunity. Social media can be great. It can create communities. It can give you that support network. If you're going through a weight loss journey, or if you're trying to build muscle,